Welcome to Muse and Metrics. This is your host, Philippa Burgess. This is Holiday Remix 2, and this is an interview from my Maps Data Design YouTube channel. So happy to have our guest. The theme for Esri this year for GIS Day is the GIS Professional, and I am studying to be that professional, but I'm so pleased today to have our guest who is a professional and is going to be telling us about her many-decade experience in this industry and its evolutions and all the cool and fun and challenging things that she's embarked on and all the many, many ways you have made kind of a striking difference. I'm excited to learn more.
Well, it's great to be here. Hi, my name is Stephanie Rodriguez. I am a geographic information systems professional based out of Montana.
I love that. And Montana, obviously, I've actually not been there, but I've been in Colorado, which is a little bit more of wide open spaces than I grew up with, both in New York and then moving to Los Angeles. So you, as I understand it, got really involved in sort of environmental sciences, which would make sense for being in Montana. There's a lot of there's a lot of environment, and there's a lot of water rights issues, and there's tribal issues, and so, as I understand it, your work has intersected with many of those arenas.
It really has. I began with a degree in mathematics. I was looking for a challenge. I wanted something to really kind of sink my teeth into. And in doing that, I learned a lot of programming. And I really wanted to apply it to something that could make a difference. And so then after I got the degree in mathematics, I went on to get another in environmental studies. And I was introduced to GIS. And well, we began with mapping techniques at the time. So we got some foundations in cartography and then started in GIS. And I was sold. I was immediately sold. I thought, this is the most amazing technology. It has endless applications. There are so many ways that I can apply what I've already known and learned to this field, which I had never even heard of back in 2003. It was something that was totally new to me. I had some experience with CAD and MS-DOS, and thought, well, I can program. I can have a career that might let me get outside. I grew up hiking and fishing and rock hounding, and so it really gave me an opportunity to kind of embrace all of those things. And so when I was younger, that was absolutely my goal. I can go out, I can do work in the field, I can collect data, I can collect locations, and then I can actually take them back, analyze them, and put them on a map so that other people can understand or utilize that data. As it pertains to the environment, I did work for about 10 years at a hydrologic consulting firm. And there I had the opportunity to work with geologists, hydrologists, chemical engineers, got to be mentored by some other GIS practitioners at the time. So I got to get into the science of it. Got work in water resources as far as statistical analysis and folks going out and sampling. Sometimes I got to participate. A lot of times I found that I was too good at what I was doing at my desk and ended up spending more time there. But I got to use all of this data that would cover hundreds of miles of watersheds to help people analyze what was happening with old mines and what might happen with new mines. And it wasn't one-sided. I got to work for both private industry and work with mining companies that were working on remediation from their past. And perhaps one of the activities that I participate in is analyzing contaminant plumes, where you've got the opportunity, you're looking at well logs, you're looking at samples of where they are and how far out they're spread and their concentrations. And so it was really, I appreciated getting to look at it from both sides, right? I not just from the government contracts, which we also worked on, but to be able to see, okay, this is the perspective of the people who are trying to develop resources that we all use, but also the perspective of the government regulators and trying to walk that line. And I love that it was a science that I could be a part of and I could apply my knowledge to that was balanced. I didn't have to pick a side. I could let the data and let the maps speak for themselves. And that went for water rights as well. Working in water rights, they're like, okay, this is all the information that's out there. I think honing in on that data was something that was really an adventure. Because at first, you come out and you're like, oh, look at all this data. There's geologic maps and topographic maps, and well, there's well points. I could see there's points of diversion and points of use and all of this information. But until digging deeper, you're like, oh, okay, not all data is created equal. Some have higher resolutions than others. As far as raster data, if you're looking at digital elevation models or older versions of a lot of things like topographic maps or geologic maps, were scanned versions of those things. They hadn't made their way into data layers, and so it was a whole progress of exploration to locate all of these little tidbits of data and get them as accurate as you could so that you could provide the best result you could, because somebody's water rights might depend on it, their retention of their water rights might depend it, or a community might not have adequate water and need to, in order to access additional resources, they needed that. We had a couple of oil spills in the rivers here in that period of time, working on projects like that to help get emergency water so they could go in and take out their pipes and fix their pipes. And they're just always an adventure, even behind the desk.
Well, and you mentioned one of the things I was reading, you were mentioning that like in Montana, there's winter and pipes freeze, and then you have to, sort of, get ahead of that. And then if there's a broken pipe and it can't be fixed, I mean, then people are without water and they're in extreme weather in a winter situation, which is not ideal. So this work really does matter in so many ways, and sort of both, sort of these environmental impacts, but also the sort of just the day-to-day things we don't think about, which is access to clean water.
Yeah. And, as far as utilities go, absolutely. In Montana, you have that. And over time, people pass down their, I'm missing the word, their legacy information. I'll call it, because my brain is not quite catching the right word for you today. But, the people who worked in the utility departments would be like, this is where the water shuts off. That's where these things are. And that was it. You might have some plans about what they plan to put in the ground, but they might not be there, or they might have been put in differently, or a different size, or a different, on the other side of the road, because it ended up conflicting with something else. And so, regarding the frozen pipes, it really did become an issue, because if you don't know where to dig to fix them, then you end up digging up a whole road, and that is a disruption of transportation, that is a disruption of fresh water, and it takes longer. It takes longer in the winter months. And you might have, there are places in Montana where where we've worked with tribal nations that they'll just be, their cars are buried in snow, or the temperature without the wind chill is already 10 below zero. And so you really do run into some serious situations with that. And so working on those utilities was a neat experience. And fire hydrants are also pretty important thing for people to know, where they are and if they're working. And so being able to be a part of a team putting those things together was really neat.
Yeah, you just mentioned fire hydrants. We did a project in my urban planning program where it was understanding there was sort of a community effort to dig out fire hydrants in a snowstorm, so that because they are really important, and you can't find them and know where they are when they're buried under feet of snow.
Yeah,
And so a
and
GIS
knowing
map
which ones are connected is
Oh yeah, because if you get to one and then you're like, oh wait, this doesn't work, that's not going to help you in an emergency. So yeah, so GIS can do all that, which is amazing. One of the things that strikes me, and it is again, I only more recently discovered GIS. And the beginning of GIS, as I understand it, really sort of was with Jon Snow and the cholera map. Whether you have your like a handwritten data map. But from when I started in graduate school or started in university as an undergrad, GIS was not a thing. And actually, even the head of the founder of our department was in the geography department. And then he was leaving. I think they were actually dissolving that department. And he sort of said, "Oh, I have an idea for a whole new division. We're going to be a USC Spatial Sciences Institute. We're going to sort of create this as a field of study." But that was created in the last 10 years. And so it really wasn't even an option for me when I had started. And I think I've always been generally interested in the science of where. And I ended up with a degree in international relations because I was interested in the world and people and just learning about culture and history and war and trade and just all of that kind of information. And then again, going back to school for urban planning, but now wanting to really get into the both the science and the art of it, and just feeling like it's another tool in my communication toolbox. And just so impressed with what it can do. But you've seen it evolve over like 20 years.
Yeah.
Give us a little bit of where that was, because a lot of it was limited or always at the bounds of what technology could afford to allow it to do.
Yeah, looking back on it, it's really pretty wild. We had, for our topographic maps, for base maps, they had started scanning them, but you would buy collections, CD collections by state of the topographic maps. And then, you'd have to go and download you'd have an index and you download the quadrangle, and then you'd have to, stitch them together to make a digital base map. That was one of my favorite things. My monitor was huge and took up, the whole center of my desk all the way to the back, because we didn't have flat screen monitors yet. And some of those things were kind of wild, and a lot of things were not mapped yet. I was super fortunate to come into GIS in Montana. Montana has really sponsored GIS pretty solidly since even before I began. We had the Montana State Library and other state organizations had data collections going. So I was really fortunate in that. But there was also a lot of things that still needed to be mapped. I think mining areas were really interesting things for me to map when I was working on those, because we'd have paper maps and we'd have a digitizing table, which was about what it sounded like. It sat on top of the table, a whole entire index, and you'd have a crosshair mouse and you'd have to trace out the features that you were looking to map and get them attached to a place in the universe. And so to come from that to just being able to like turn on a topo map in the background on a phone it's just kind of wild, it's going from T9 text to being able to open all of these maps on your phone and actually use that as a mapping device is pretty great strides over time.
Yes, and I see gaps. I see like the next piece of it, because I love generative AI and all of AI, machine learning and deep learning, and I've been playing with tabular data. And for example, in Google's Bard, you can ask it for some information, and then you can ask it to put it on a table, and then you can export that table into a sheet. But it can't yet, like it doesn't quite know center points, and it's not very accurate just yet. But I have a vision for the future. Like for example, in emergencies, I was when I was experimenting with it, I couldn't get it past 10. It just 10 was its max. But to be able to sort of look at a county or look at a city and say, what are the fire stations? Where are the hospitals? And have it be able to sort of generate that information as tabular data. That is what I see as the future.
Yeah, some of it I think by necessity has to move backwards almost. I think things get, geographic information systems, a lot of people leave the information systems out of the equation in developments. And I saw that when I was much younger in GIS, and I've seen it up to the current date that you just pull whatever data sources are out there, which is something that AI tends to do, and say, oh, here, this is your map, this is your analysis. And without that tabular data, without the metadata behind it, it is very difficult to discern what the quality of that data is, what the resolution of that data is that's been interpreted. Because you can take, say, an elevation file, a roster, and you can get the computer to break it down into smaller pixels for you and interpolate so that each pixel is really, representing a foot instead of a mile. But that doesn't mean that you made the data better. That doesn't mean you now have 1 foot resolution data. You just means that you have more pixels. And I think that is a really big challenge to overcome, and a gap to bridge, like we were saying, is to really get that integrated and make sure that that information is available. Because I think without it, you don't really know the differences, where fact and fiction are separated in your data. And I think that's a really great, kind of transition into the concept of metadata, because I really do strongly advocate for developing and using metadata. It makes it, I mean, it is a cover your butt situation, to be fair, for data scientists out there, but not only for those purposes, but it's easier to pick up where you left off. Having worked in the field for a lot of years, I worked for one firm for about 10 years and another for about 6. I also did some instruction, and I really found that what we had, pardon my train of thought, going up. But when you have to go back to a project that you have worked on in the past, even your own self, to be able to say, oh yeah, where did I get that data? What was that data source? Where was it stored? How accurate was it? Was it based off of, previously collected information? Is this something that was collected in-house? Projections are tremendously important. When I was an instructor in GIS, that was one of the first things that I would tell people when they started accessing data. Check your projections. Projection on the fly was not always a thing. And so you would open it and somebody would add a data set, but if it was in the wrong projection, you would have absolutely no idea where it was. And so you'd have to teach, as an instructor, I would have to teach students, okay, this is, you need to go in and you need to check your projections. What's the most likely for this data set? Is it going to be a state plane projection or a local projection or a UTM projection? And then your data would appear and you would know that. But if you didn't have that data documented, then you just wouldn't really have any kind of idea. And so I think tracking your data is really important. And I think that, there's a lot of tools for that now, things that make metadata creation easier, but also make a folder of bookmarks, bookmark every page that you visit when you go to download something. Create a bibliography. That's, there are a lot of options for tracking your data. I know that the purists would like everything in a dedicated metadata format, but the fact of the matter is the resources and time available to you and different jobs are going to be vastly different. whether it's a private firm or government or, larger institution.
But even at the student level, one, we're accessing a lot of data, a lot of publicly available data, and I get a lot of data from ArcGIS Online. There's no metadata. Like, I don't know. It, I just sort of like, oh, that sort of fits my project. I'll throw it in there. But if I was doing anything more scientific, I probably want to be able to cite it and source it. Like Living Atlas has metadata, but most of the things I find on AGOL, no. And then also the practice, I think it's really important. Even as a student, I create my own data sets, and I don't often fill in that metadata, and I should, to sort of say, where did I get this? One of them, if it was like a parade route that I created a mile online for, because like nobody else had that. But even just a tag, what, why, where, how, would probably have some value. And so maybe you can sort of, how should we as practitioners, whether we're at the student level or company, private government, but if we're not being mandated to do it, but still feel like we should have intention to do it, what should we be thinking about?
I think the source of the data is very important, and the location of the data. One of the things as GIS has evolved is everything's not on disks or downloaded to a local server. You do have ArcGIS Online and Living Atlas and base maps, and you need to note for yourself, is this data I'm going to need again in the future? You might turn on that map in 5 years and your data sources might have disappeared. So you need to assess, do I need this long term, or is the exported map document going to be adequate for my needs? I think that has become more and more important, because those data sources do disappear, and that is definitely a personal lesson learned, because when they first started to have those resources available, it really wasn't a mindset of like, oh, this is here and now it's going to be gone. But in reality, it actually can just be gone. You say, I don't want to host this data source anymore. I don't want it to be publicly available anymore. And yeah.
You have just stumbled across a gap in my knowledge, and I'm curious to fill it, because I am playing with editing in my sort of content creator journey, and I use two softwares. I use VSDC, which ingests my audio, picture, video, whatever I'm having, it fully ingests it. And then I use Premiere Pro, which all it does is just point to the data source. And I learned a hard lesson working in Premiere Pro, and I was specifically choosing that because I was doing a lot of transcription, and I had a great transcription tool. But then when I moved some files on the back end, everything broke. I had no idea. And so I tend to think of ArcGIS Pro as something that ingests, like that once I've pulled it in, it's permanent. So with VSDC, if I remove a file, move it, delete it, doesn't matter. It owns it. Whereas with Premiere Pro, if that file is gone, unless you've exported and have your final video, but you can never go back and edit or make any changes, because if it can't point to the data, it just errors out. And so I really hadn't considered in my GIS work that when I pull data onto a map, I kind of assume that I have the data, that if it's in my map, that it's mine now. And I don't really consider that if someone deletes it on the back end, that could just disappear.
And you can do that yourself as well. Shapefiles are not really as common a format anymore, but a lot of people are still ArcMap purists out there. I know, because I participated in training several people in trying to convert from being in ArcMap to being in ArcGIS Pro. And they do handle things a little bit differently, but they still have, file paths to whatever database that you're connected to. If you're connecting to databases, even if they're your own local personal data, you still need the appropriate path names to get there. You still need to have, be able to locate, say, the back end as you were saying. And if somebody moves that database or, puts it another file down in the server, then even your relative paths will be broken. In my experience, relative paths do tend to work better for storing data than direct paths. But ArcGIS Pro and ArcMap in general, both they both have their little quirks. And so then you get into other kind of best practices like minimizing file names and using camel case or underscores, avoiding special characters or spaces in your file names. And that can become an issue if you're working in a corporate level, if you're working with folks who don't have that don't have that background in mind. We'll
Well,
say.
and so similar to you, as far as like, I've always been interested in coding, but I did it to sort of in the early 90s with HTML. And, but I never followed that path. I just basically did a lot of digital marketing, and eventually all of those things became what you see is what you get, and no code, low code solutions. So when I got back to programming, I was like, oh, this is a familiar, comfortable space that I really like. And I'm seeing a lot of the, coding, basically, you have to have file paths and you have to sort of have all, so I'm seeing a lot of similarities. But of course, I set up my computer and I named my hard drive first name, space, last name. So now anytime I'm in a GIS programming and customization course right now. So now anytime I'm doing anything, I have to put it in quotes because it won't process otherwise. And so you were learning about absolute paths and relative paths. Like all of that now is kind of brand new to me, and I'm really grateful that I'm learning it and I'm seeing huge application for it. But it actually has showed me that my desire to want to do videos and editing, my desire to want to work with GIS, work with databases, work all this stuff, is leading me to a fundamental foundational need to be really organized. Because if you don't have, I have very creative thinking, which tends to also be a little bit unstructured and quite messy. So I need deep learning. I'm not tabular. So, but I'm realizing, because even like a question we had in class, the other, like, what's one thing you want to kind of really work on kind of learning? And I actually was like, organization. I like it all falls apart on me if I don't get super organized.
Yeah. And, the FDIC, and you will have to look up the full path of that if you do. But there are standards that have been created. And so, things are categorized into different sectors, into, transportation data codes and elevation data codes. And so when you're creating your own storage, that's a good place to start. And kind of depends on whether your focus is on a sole kind of area or clientele. So you might end up having, a GIS file on the direct drive letter, but then right below that have say Montana, and below that have transportation, or you can break it up vice versa. I've worked with various file path plans throughout the years, and sometimes you get in them and you're like, nope, this isn't going to work. You've got to dive down too far, and say you're calling something up in your code, you can max out on the length of the file path and be like, oh, it'll only let you have this long of a file path, and then you're kind of out of luck, and you gotta shuffle things around and revise your code, and then oh, my back end moved, so now I've got to change the file paths to everything else in the data set. And that is a very very testy thing to work out, because I've tried to do the file paths that are really just the standards of what are out there. Like I said, transportation, elevation, those kinds of things. But then when you get, like you said, you start working with different clientele, and you're like, oh, wait, no, I need this separated out into this sector. I can't have all of this because I have been requested for full data disclosure from clients before. I did recall one where they wanted everything that could be printed out to be printed out and everything that could be saved off to external hard drives to be saved off. And it was hundreds of gigabytes of data. And I think we figured out it was around 1,000 pages of paper to print out all of the associated information. So, not muddling up your clients is also important when you're setting up those file paths. One thing that has worked well for me in the past, I am a fan of versioning. Whether you're in a database that actually will track versioning for you, or you have to, you're in a lower level licensing structure where you have to export your own. I'm a big fan of that. I like using a format where you have year, month, and four-digit year, 2-digit month, 2-digit day, like that in reverse. Because then if you have 15 files with the same name and you sort them, the dates are in the correct order, and you can pick, the earliest to the latest, and that way you've got some protection if files get corrupted, or if your project kind of changes direction, and so you have to go back to some of that source data before it was manipulated and adjust it, whether that be the tabular data or the actual line work to digital data that's associated with that.
So a lot of what you're saying, I'm seeing in the work we're doing in coding, because this is the semester where we're pulling the coding into our GIS, and you had that background. And in one of my earlier interviews was someone who's like, I don't code at all. Like, coding's not my thing. And so it's interesting kind of the levels, and just one, how intersectional GIS is, and two, sort of the levels of application that people can have. And of course, obviously, the more you do, the more you learn. But I think we still tend to sometimes go down well-worn paths in terms of, the types of work that we're attracted to. I want to talk a little bit about GISP, because that is a professional standard. And one of our themes today is the GIS Professional. We had an assignment where they wanted us to do the application, count up the points, knowing full well that we weren't ready for it, but just to sort of see where we were at in that. And I hit all my marks for education. I hit all my marks for, actually, I think, being early into the field, because I am participatory in contributions to the field, but I don't yet have my professional 5 years of work. So talk to me about sort of that credential, the I don't know, just and you've been involved in a lot of organizations. Like, I believe that is sponsored by or created by ERISA, and you've been involved in ERISA. We'd connected through being part of Women in GIS. So these organizations and these accreditations and credentials matter, because they do kind of show who we are on that GIS ladder.
Yeah, I think that the GISP was it was an important thing for me to get. I felt at the time that it was definitely an acknowledgement of my accomplishments and my experience in GIS. And I do think that has helped with employers and job searches in the past. One of the fun things, I got to be a part of in ERISA, actually, because I was already certified. I got certified before there was testing, but I actually participated in the panels that were deciding what should be on the exams. And so that was a pretty neat thing to be a part of, and have that experience of, wow, you're helping to set foundations for other folks who are coming after you, and who are being moving into their careers and hoping to attain that certification. And I do think it's important, like you said, there are sidetracks. There are say, you were mentioning somebody who doesn't do any coding. And so there are definitely, and this is why there were panels, on the testing, because some people are like, absolutely, I couldn't do my job without having this knowledge. This must be on the test. And, from geodesy to, cartography, and there are so many different factors, and really not everybody uses the same set of skills, even though we're part of one GIS community. And so I do think it's been valuable to me, and it's been important to employers. That I do see that there are some components where you get into the exams and stuff where it might not be for everybody. Um, and there are a variety of options out there. There are several different kind of certificate levels that are available that mirror your expertise in Esri products, and things that mirror certifications that mirror your expertise in Autodesk products, and I think that I do think that foundational knowledge and verification of that is important. But I do realize that it's not for everybody. I've followed some other podcasters that in stuff in GIS in the past, and they're like, no, we don't want anything to do with it. We're going fully independent. We're going fully open source. And so there are definitely different parties to it. But from my experience, it's been a positive experience to be a part of that community of people. And like I said, I had some probably more activity in it when I was first a GISP than as the years have gone on, and family and career and life happening, then things kind of shift around. And so I did participate in the Montana Association of Geographic Information Professionals. I was on their board of directors for a period of time, and worked as education chair, and that was a really great experience. I got to help work in the publication and award of the scholarships that they provide. And so seeing all of the wonderful ideas everybody that folks had out there for what they were going to do, how they were going to use GIS in their classrooms, and kind of build up this new generation. That was another really great experience to be a part of. I've been in Women in GIS for a couple of years now, and I found that that's a really great community, wonderful camaraderie. I have presented on there for a lightning talk on I think the international organization of Women in GIS on my work in tribal transportation. And oh my goodness, I had gone through the courses to become a certified master naturalist in Montana in 2021. I'm still working on recertifying, because you don't stay forever. It's kind of like the GISP. You need to have all of the credentials to recertify. But it was another good experience where you're seeing where other people are focused in their interests and their passions. And I think any time that you get to be a part of one of those communities, it's just it's enlivening to continue to learn and grow through those people, and opportunities like the one you've provided today to really share, the forums that are available for the women in GIS, to be able to help out a comrade in need, when somebody's like, okay, I'm stuck on this project and I really don't understand how I can make this work or make this more efficient. And it's fun to be able to jump in there and help somebody out with some of that institutional knowledge that is still up in the cobwebs here.
No, it's important, and I think intergenerational mentorship and friendships are really important. I mean, I'm 20 plus years my senior to many of my classmates, I've got a bunch of classmates and good friends now who are doing what they call a progressive. So they're getting their BA, moving into an MA. And so they're in the master's classes with me. And it's joyful. And I think it's helpful because I may be new to GIS, but I bring other skills and perspectives to our relationship and our conversation. And if anything, I find I bring more confidence. And, I'm still at the very beginning of my learning curve, and I've definitely fallen into tech holes and things like that. But I just think in life, I think that's one of the things we get as we mature is just a higher level of what works for us, what doesn't work for us, and just our own sort of standards.
It is. And that's really great to hear that from you. And I hope that you're able to give some of that off to your fellow classmates, because I really do think you're just beginning to learn when you leave school. Like this is not, it's not a closed chapter in a book. You just got the keys to the library, and which actually happens to be another of my passions. I do some volunteering with the Friends of the Library and our local chapter. It allows me to spend a little bit of time around books and knowledge and all of the ideas of the other people ahead of me who were able to continue working further into their careers. And it's just invaluable. And that continuation of the sharing of knowledge and the willingness to continue learning are invaluable. I mean, after even after I'd gone to school, I had a certificate. I worked in my first GIS position for almost a decade, and then I went to something completely different. I mean, but you realize how intertwined everything is as you get a little bit older and more experienced, and that you are able to carry those experiences through to your brand new experiences, where you get to learn new things and you get to develop new things. That I had gone from working in a hydrology environmental scientist kind of GIS coordinator position to working in tribal transportation. And I had the wonderful opportunity to mentor people from the tribal transportation departments and many of the communities in Montana. And I got to assist in developing a geographic information system platform for their transportation programs as well, which was, an entirely new challenge coming out of water resources. But having that foundation in GIS and having those skills, the kind of skills one develops on their way to that GISP certification, you have the building blocks, and you can go on to apply it to any other, any other field. And I think that's what's so amazing, that you can specialize in GIS and at the same time you can work in anything. And I think that's just really fantastic.
I agree with that. And I think that's I'm interested in so many things. The big takeaway for me on my first year that I went to the Esri User Conference is that I felt like I'd earned my seat at the table. I was there, I had my year into a steep learning curve of GIS. And yet, of all the people I talked to, of like tens of thousands of people who were there, I felt like I was the only one I was encountering who identified as a YouTuber, a podcaster, or a blogger. And so I left there saying, I should lean into that as well. So to kind of be able to bring what I have done for 20 years, not necessarily that I've been in front of the camera, but I've always been in and around entertainment and media. I love tell a story, put on a show. I love zeitgeist communication. And so realizing that there's an opportunity to create a stage and that we can share this really important information with people. I still have to learn how to edit better. Give me a year and I'll have After Effects and all the rest of it going. And I also want to learn how to create like BIM and 3D environments and do cool things with my maps and video. And I realized I'm like, well, maybe they're not that separate. They all can kind of fold together. And that everything I brought before me is not lost.
Yeah, I absolutely. I think that that's fabulous. And I look forward to seeing where you take your GIS storytelling and your podcasts and your YouTube channel. And I think you've got a lot to offer our community with your history and your background. And I think that's going to be a terrific story to follow. I look forward to seeing all of the content that you create and share with all of the other GIS professionals out there with their different perspectives and experiences. And I think it's a really great asset to our community to get that content out there, and for yourself also, as as you put it, a non-traditional learner, that it's never too late to keep learning. And
it's never too late to keep learning, but I also am also a reality is that in my GIS I'm going for a more junior position, but if I can bring something to the table that has more experience and sort of owns the fact that I'm a mid-career professional. So it's like finding like that perfect intersection where it's okay that I'm a beginner, but I can also bring something else to the table.
And I think that will certainly come for you. I think that you have the skills and the drive to pull all of those pieces together. And like we said, that's the great thing about GIS. You can pull all of the things together. Every story has a place, and I have the feeling that you can lead us on an adventure through those places with that combination of skills.
Yeah, and I think when you talked about, and it was sort of sharing that from when you said, hey, I was in one place and then I moved to another, but it still was progressive. It's still, you use the things you'd learned before, you were able to build on it. And I think in my beginning of my GIS journey, I wanted to put everything else away. And I was like, okay, I'm here now. And it wasn't until I went to the conference and I interacted with other people did I get a mirror of who I am. And I was like, oh, okay. I see this now in a way that I've never seen this before, that all that went before is not lost. And that I did one of those women in GIS talks, and I did Education's Like a River, because when I started urban planning, I didn't know what I wanted to do with it. And it was only in my urban planning program, what do we do R, and they sort of pointed to GIS saying, this is really important and useful, but we don't teach it here. And it's its own thing. And so that's why I kind of went to the GIST program as a certificate program. And then I was like, wait, I'm not done yet. I'm just getting started. So let's go do a second master's. And it keeps evolving. I keep finding new things. Like right now I'm in a project management class, and I realize I'm like looking at my whole career and like, I've never articulated it as project management, but I run projects and I've produced film and I've produced television and I've produced events. And I'm like, I think that I've published books. I'm like, I think that's project management. I've just never given it those terms. And so I'm getting to sort of see that some of the skills I have are translatable and the world keeps changing. Like I'm in this Google group and I'm learning so much about AI and machine learning and deep learning, and we're just at the beginning of all that. So I think I love GIS for as much as I do, because it's part of this forever learning journey.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's just fantastic to hear for somebody who's coming into the field. I think people are always kind of amazed by it. What people see on the front end is that they type an address in on their phone and it gives them directions to somewhere. And I don't know, it might lead them down an alley and they can see a picture on their phone, but the reality of the depth of the data and the information that are out there that are able to be broadcast. And we use maps every day, GIS and analysis, like it comes into everyday life all the time. People just don't recognize it as that. When you see your meteorological maps on the news, or an election map, and census maps, and when they take the census, that that's going to go into what your community's funding is going to, federal funding is going to be for the next decade. And so it really does come into your everyday life. And I think that a lot of folks just don't quite they don't put the name to the activity. Geez, GIS. When I say that I've, that I've worked in GIS in the past, most people just look at me with a blank stare.
I saw a meme the other day that I loved, which was like a guy looked like he was like in a toga, sort of like kind of kingly, and he's like me explaining GIS to my colleagues, and he's like he's on his game, and he's a baller, and then it's like, and then he's like crying and like just so upset. It's like me explaining GIS to my family. So it's like context is everything within these things for sure. And what's the other thing I was thinking about? We were just talking about in it's yeah, it's just so intersectional, and I just think it's, and oh, I know what I was thinking. This is like my little baby brain. When my mom was working in real estate, and her office was adjacent to an architect, and so a lot of times after school I'd go to the architect's office, and I could not understand why or how, like what he did, because I was like, in my little brain where we lived, everything that could ever have been built was already built. So I was like, well, it's done. Like, what are you doing? Like, this is, I don't, what are you building? What, it didn't, the concept of a remodel or restructure or redesign or like, it was not in my, like, I didn't understand. And I feel like that way about maps. Like, I realized like my brain as an adult has thought like, well, weren't all the maps finished in the 1800s? Weren't we done? And so I do actually believe some people think like I think, which is, aren't we done with mapping? And realizing how modern and technological and important it is, and how we use it every day, but it's invisible to most people.
Yeah, I think it's a spectacular tool that can help show both people's similarities and people's differences, and I think that is quite important in our culture, and our as the world has gotten smaller, and people from different countries, different nations, different cultures and religions all come together in these places to see that that you can use GIS to show, oh wow, there's more people dispersed than you think, and okay, how can all of these things come to work together? And I mean, we can see in the news that there are wars being fought over boundaries, and whose line is whose to this day, and I think that having those maps, being able to show those things, being able to show, as you've kind of even proposed, showing those maps and those faces, and that's that's how our modern news is come to work. Is these things are closer together than you think, and they're more accessible than you think, and really having those opportunities in the world to share space and share knowledge, and really see, one of the things that I see that comes out over here is like, the happiest countries in the world. And whether you're looking at the happiest places or the most war-torn places, when you get to see those places and you're like, oh, these are the things that these places have in common, you're like, oh, these places all have, mountain ranges, or these places all have rivers, these places all have, healthcare, however you want to pull the data together, that you can use that to see, the things places have more similarities than you think, and things are more intertwined than you think. And I think GIS really gets to show us the smallness of the world in that way, and really the interplay of things. When I was very young in GIS and working in water resources, that was one thing that really just blew me away kind of immediately, because I was like, oh wait, it's not, you're not just looking at a map of the water, you're looking at how these tiny little, what is the sedimentation, different levels of pollution, or nitrogen, nitrates, or all of these very different compositions at this tiny molecular level, and at the same time you're looking at geology, and you're looking at how these vast structures and these little teeny tiny things, and the water and the soil and the people and the livestock and the
I was gonna say,
the plant life.
Wildlife, and you also have something to do with zoologists. There's a zoo in one of your activities.
Oh, okay. So because I have been more homebound in recent times, but I still like to stay active. There's a wonderful site called Zooniverse where a person can volunteer, and you can volunteer for anything from transcribing the labels on insect collections. So, they track the health and size of populations of bugs that have been found over time, or, to NASA projects. They have NASA projects on there where folks can volunteer to scan the skies and see if they can identify the structures that NASA's looking for in these vast, telescope images. We're looking at wildlife cameras where you're helping identify what animals are coming through in these wildlife camera areas. I've done some that were located in Africa. I've volunteered and looked at some of the ones that evaluated some of the ones that are in the American Southwest, and so it's a really great platform that's out there that helps people, organizations get volunteers to crowdsource this scientific knowledge, and it's done in they have multiple people, so if you mess up, they'll catch it. Somebody else will catch it. They have multiple people will look at each one, or like with the beetles, they'll catch your typos. But it's just a really great opportunity to still contribute and be a part of be a part of the world, be a part of the greater data collection, because it will help down the line. It might help protect a species or find the next galaxy, identify the next galaxy or asteroid or whatever they're looking for from NASA. And so it's been nice to have that platform to still be able to be a part of something when not necessarily able to go out and romp around and collect the data myself anymore. So
yep, citizen science and VGI, volunteered graphic information. And actually one of our other interviews was about public participatory GIS. So I learned a lot about that. And so that really is kind of what you're talking about as well.
Yeah.
And I love it. So I thank you. I think we're going to wrap up. Any parting words for you?
I think the easy things seem simple, and the simplest things are most complicated. That is coming from some of that beetle tag transcription. I think that the world processes now at lightning speed with AI, and you've got a lot of this background map. So to advise to take the care, to take the time you need to do the job well, to do the job right, and try not to let the others around you pressure you on your project planning, because in the end, it will be better if it is done. It will be better if it is done appropriately and correctly. And bringing quality data to the world, especially in this world of AI, is really valuable. Because as we said, otherwise it may just get digested and spit back out, and decisions and mistakes could be made.
Or you yourself will lose your own data. So
yeah, losing your own data is also something that we do not want to happen. But we certainly want to take care in what we're putting out into the world, because whatever we're putting out there today will be what the next generation of GIS professionals and practitioners will build. They will build upon what we put out there, and so it's really important to take care, to do honest, ethical work,
and have good metadata.
Absolutely.